Hello, my name's Martin, and welcome to another bicycle review. This is another Bikes Direct bike. This one's called a Windsor Wellington 2.0, but this review is for all Windsor bikes, because every Windsor bike sold on Bikes Direct in this configuration is probably the same frame. So you're basically buying the same frame throughout their entire line, but they're just upgrading in better components as you pay more money. So the first thing I want to tell you is what you do not get on this bike. And you do not get a mirror, you do not get the bottle cages or the bottles, you don't get the aero bottles and the aero cages, and these wheels do not come with it. And as of right now, this crankset came with the bike, but it's no longer spec'd with this crank. So it's basically the same bike, but I think the crank is probably downgraded a little bit. So that's one big question mark between the review on this bike and what you actually will be buying as of today, which 2012. This should be a fairly fast interview because, or fairly fast review, because this bike has been absolutely wonderful. It's near perfection. So I'm not going to spend much time talking about what's wrong with it, because I couldn't find anything wrong with it. So let's start with the frame, which is probably the best part of this bike. I pulled it out of the box, and I saw the pictures on Bikes Direct, but when I pulled it out of the box, you could see that these are complex molded tubes. They're not just plain round, plus they're all ovalized, and the ovalized tubes makes for a more aerodynamic bike for one, but for me the biggest thing is the ovalized top tube gives me clearance for my legs. Any these aluminum bikes that have big round top tubes, the inside of my legs will hit on the tubes. So this was ideal. I had bought this bike just a little bigger than normal. Normally I would race on a 58, but I'm tired of being way over in that position. So this is a 62, which is about it's 40 centimeters, or about 1.6 inches bigger than a 58. The finish on the bike is excellent. Again, of course, the decals are clear coated over, and it has a replaceable derailleur hanger. So everything about this bike is professional, including the frame angles. This bike is professional throughout. For a $350 bike, this has got to be the best bike in the world, bar none. I've ridden the best bikes in the world. I've ridden professionally. I've had bikes custom built to my specifications. This bike is just as good as any bike I've ever ridden, including the Bianchi aluminum bikes, which are really good aluminum bikes. The ride quality on this bike is absolutely excellent. Whatever design they've done on this, they've obviously done some very careful designing, and they've come up with a very fast, very comfortable racing bike. And I'm calling this a racing bike because it has professional angles in it. The head tube angle is 74 degrees. You don't find that on anything but racing bikes. The seat tube angle is 73. Seat tube angles vary just a little bit, but it's more of a normal seat tube angle. But the head tube angle is telling me that this is designed for somebody who really wants a fast handling racing bike. And that's what this is. Excellent handling, excellent comfort level on this frame. It's hard to believe they built this frame for that little, but you can't go wrong with this frame, and you can't go wrong with this bike. if you only got 350 bucks to spend, you're going to buy this bike and use it as is. There's nothing you have to do to change other than what doesn't fit you. Now, fit, of course, you have the seat that goes back and forth, that's fine, but you may have to buy a different length stem, and you may have to buy different width handlebars. That just comes with fit. And if you're particular about crank arm lengths, you may have to buy a new crank. That's all has to do with fit. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, every single bike sold never gives you that choice. They set them up for you and that's it. If you don't like it, you have to take that component off, go buy another one, and hope to sell the one you got. So this one came equipped exactly the way I wanted it, except for some fit components. So the only fit changes I've done is I've gone to a wider bar. I'm a very kind of a wide-shouldered guy, so the bars were just too narrow for me. And because I bought the frame a little big, the stem was too long, and I went to a shorter stem. Now this bike, the Wellington 2, comes with a steel fork. If you spend $50 more, you get a carbon fork. I didn't go that direction because I really don't trust cheap carbon. So a cheap carbon fork, I was too afraid of trying one out. Besides, this fork actually, the paint matches the bike, and I think it makes a much better looking bike. The fork is absolutely perfect, absolutely excellent. It's very comfortable. It absorbs all the road shocks. This is very tight. You can tell by the way the tire is tucked into the seat tube. It's a very tight wheelbase bike. So it would tend to be a very stiff riding bike if it wasn't designed right. But Windsor has designed an incredible frame. Excuse me, I had a bee flying in front of my face. So when I changed the stem, because this bike came with one of the older fashioned quill stems, you can still buy quill stems, that's not a problem. But because the market is almost all threadless now, I figured my choices in threadless stems were much better. So what this is actually, I'll give you some close-up pictures at the end of the review. This is actually just a quill post sticking into here. The quill post, of course, is the one that goes inside the tube, has a little locking mechanism, and as you crank down the bolt, it tightens up the stem. So this works just like all quill stems do, but all it is a post, and it accepts a normal threadless stem. So that's a nice option to go to if you want a really big selection in stems. So that worked out well. As far as it holding together fine as a kind of a retrofit thing. I put it on 2 years ago, and I've checked the bolts. I check bolts about once a month or so, and never had to tighten them. Everything's sitting in there fine. The stem is made by, or I should say the post is made by Profile. Can't go wrong there either. The specifications on this bike, of course, are listed on Bikes Direct, so I usually don't go through any specifications because you can find them there. It's kind of a waste of time. What you can see is, of course, these 24-spoke wheels, of course, didn't come with it. Now, I have replaced the wheels, but not because the wheels need replaced. I had bought a Gravity Avenue FB bike, which had wheels that were totally useless, and because that was my main commuting bike, it was more important. So I had to take the wheels off this bike and put it on the Gravity FB so I could continue riding that one. So this one has been sitting around now for 6 to 8 months without wheels on it because I couldn't afford to buy wheels. So just lately I've been able to come up with the $130, I think it was, for these Vuelta wheels. And I'll have a review on these wheels in a couple of months after I put some miles on it. But right now there's only a couple of hundred miles on them, and it's not worth talking about yet. So I'll give you a full review on these wheels later because they are very inexpensive, but they've been touted by the manufacturer and by the people that sell them to be extremely strong. Now, of course, the trade-off is they're heavy by racing wheel standards, but I'm not racing on this bike, and it didn't add any weight to the bike from the wheels that were on there before. Wheels that came on here before were 36 spoke, Alex rimmed, no name hub on them, and they've been absolutely wonderful. Not for for a cheap wheel that comes on a cheap bike, they are just what you would expect. They are a little weak, so about once a month they need to be retrued. But I've been running them for 2 years on a stock wheel, and I do not take it easy on wheels. At 195 pounds, when I stand or accelerate on a hill, that rear wheel takes a beating. And that's why the Avenue FB wheels only lasted 2 months and started popping spokes and going way out of true. So I knew those wheels, even with truing, weren't going to hold up. So, as far as the function of the parts, they are all working very well. The crankset that came on this is a FSA Vero. No, Tempo, sorry. I'm not sure what the difference between the Vero and Tempo is. They seem to be very similar cranks. But this is the Tempo, and the Tempo, I have both the Tempo and Vero cranks. They are excellent cranks. They may be heavy, I don't know, but they're stiff and they don't break. So after 2 years of riding this crank, if it was a bad crank, I would have cracked a crank arm in half by now, and I don't see any signs of this crank failing. So again, you're getting quality components. Now the only thing on the new bikes is that this crankset doesn't come with. So if you have your doubts on the new crank, if the new crank flexes a lot, you might want to get rid of it and put a Vero or Tempo FSA crank on it for about $50 to $60. They're all bolting up to the standard tapered bottom bracket. So you can take that crank off the bike you buy and put this one on and not have to replace the bottom bracket. But again, I'm not familiar with that crank, and you may be able to keep it. You just have to. That'll be your judgment on that one. So the components performance on here are excellent. These are I think these are Shimano's 2200 shifters, which of course is a step below their named brands. It's a step below the Sora, but it comes with Sora derailleur, rear derailleur, and again a numbered front derailleur, but they function great. They're a really good shifting bike. I have no complaints there either. So and the braking is also very good. I noticed when I went to the new wheels have a CNC machined braking surface, and my braking performance doubled. I got twice the braking and twice the control as I did over the wheels that came on here that have the ridiculous anodized sidewalls, which of course wear out as you brake on them. I'm not sure who thought anodizing the side of a braking surface was a good idea, but again, the engineers are often fairy tale land. So these brakes turned out to be excellent. These Tektro brakes, you can adjust them down so that you get just very little pull on the lever, and when you brake on these, the bike's going to stop. So here we are with a $350 bike and a ex-professional rider giving it rave reviews. Of course, I have no connection with Bikes Direct, and I have no connection with Windsor. In fact, I don't even know who Windsor is. They have a website. I've written them letters. They haven't written me back, but I think they're an English company, as far as I can tell. And of course, they design it, and this one's made in This bike's made in Taiwan, and most bikes are made in China or Taiwan, so they spec it out. The Taiwanese build it for them, and then someone puts the components on here and ships it out. That's the way the bike industry is now. A bike company, for the most part, is nothing more than a design company, and then they're using the labor-efficient Orient to actually construct the bikes for them. And that's the way it is for about everything. But in this case, you don't have to go out and spend the equivalent of, I don't know, $1,000 to equal this bike. After you've spent $1,000, I'm not sure what quality frame you're going to get. This frame is as good a quality as you're ever going to find in any bike for an aluminum frame with a steel fork. It just doesn't get any better than this. It's comfortable, and it handles great, and I can't say more good things about it. Windsor, congratulations. Your designs are excellent. They're as good as any bike company out there. I sure hope you don't take that to heart and increase the price of your bikes, though, because for all of us starving artists out there and anybody else who's got a very low income, this is the only bike we can afford to buy. And what a great bike it is. I'm not sure what else I can say. Again, it's a Bikes Direct bike. Bikes Direct is an excellent company. They are selling bikes for basically half, they're selling them for wholesale. They're selling them for half of what they would regularly be in a shop, given the same components and the same quality. So if it's a $350 bike, it's at least, you're going to pay at least a minimum of $700 in the store somewhere. And of course, that's just a huge generalization. You'd be hard-pressed to find a better bike than this. The only thing is, it's a little on the heavy side. This is the largest frame you can buy at 62 centimeters, and it probably weighs in without all the goodies on it at around 23 pounds, maybe 24 pounds. But to me, that weight is still light enough to give it excellent acceleration, climbing, and still lots of fun to ride. If I'm going to ride in a Peloton, this is not going to be a problem. Of course, a $3,000 16-pound bike always helps you when riding in a Peloton. But you could actually race on this bike if you wanted to, but you're kind of pushing the limits of a true racing bike. You're kind of pushing the limits, but you actually could race on this bike, and if you were a very strong rider, you could win on this bike. But I had bought this bike just for long distance riding. You can see it's equipped with a wide range gearing. It's triple crank set and a 1128 cassette. And I use this for long distance riding in the mountains where you're climbing for anywhere from 15 to 20 miles without much of a break. So the low gears are necessary because I don't plan on walking. The low gears are necessary to gear down and give yourself a break once in a while, and then get yourself rest, catch your breath, and then you can shift up and start climbing a little faster again. And this works out great for that. But if you are looking for a great bike for $350, you're going to be hard pressed to find anything within $200 to $300 of what this is. The only bike I would move to next on Bikes Direct is I would move up to the Motobacan a Grand Record, which comes with wheels like these, for around $600 to $650. That would be your next step up. Anything in between is kind of a waste of money, in my opinion. As you move up in the Windsor line from the 3.0 to the Bristol, I think it's the Bristol, you do get a carbon fork. You get a threadless stem. If the threadless stem is very important to you, then go ahead and spend the $50 extra and buy the $400 Wellington 3.0. I can't tell you how the carbon fork's going to ride, because of course I don't have it, but given that it's a Windsor, it's probably designed extremely well, and you probably won't be disappointed. So that's about it for now. I'm going to give you some close-up photos of this bike, show you the stem conversion that I made, and maybe get you a little better look at these ovalized compound tubes. Now that we're at the end of the interview, or at the end of the review, I wanted to talk a little bit about crank arm length, which is a really confusing subject, because the difference in crank arm lengths are very, very small, but they can make a huge difference. For the past 20 years of experimenting with a 170, 172 and a half, and a 175 crank arm length. Trying to figure out what advantages there are and disadvantages there are to these cranks. And after 20 years of riding, I can't really say much. It's hard to tell what the real difference is. My only conclusion is, at this point, is I prefer the 170 for the road. So my road bike, such as this one's got a 170 millimeter crank. The mountain bikes, I've continued with the 175. The hybrid bike I have, I'm experimenting with a 172 and a half. So the conclusions on those is, supposedly you're supposed to get more torque with a longer crank arm. Now, whether you do or not, I'm not quite sure. It's hard to judge from just going out and trying to feel whether one crank's better than the other. The main reason I want a 170 crank on my road bike is the smaller the crank arm, the easier it is to come up to a very high spin. So the 170 on a road bike gives you a very good range of spin revolutions. So you should feel comfortable anywhere from 80 to 120 for anybody experienced, and maybe from 80 to 90 for inexperienced people. Crank arms are supposed to match, or supposedly supposed to match somewhat your size. I am 6 feet tall with a 32-inch inseam or 33-inch. And bikes today are coming equipped with 175s. It's hard to find any bike in a large frame size that doesn't have a 175. I would not ride that crank anymore. The 170 gives me a very easy to spin crank. So staying at the 100 RPM range is not a problem. We're at 175. I can't stay very comfortable in a 175 crank at 100 RPM. So what you end up doing is shifting a lot more with the longer cranks, because you don't have that wide range of cadences or spin to make up the difference. On a mountain bike, I've stayed with the 175, hoping that I'm getting better torque. And the other thing is a lot of times you're just standing, not so much standing, but lifting yourself slightly off the saddle onto the cranks to avoid the shocks and the rocks coming up through a hardtail. So the 175s make it easier to run a lower RPM and kind of stay on top of the cranks for comfort also. Yep, I hope that's been helpful to anybody looking for a crank. But I would suggest for beginners, if you have a very, very short frame, if you're very, very short, you should be running 165s. If anybody from probably 5'5" on up to 6 foot, you should be running about 170 millimeter cranks. And if you're over 6 feet, 6 feet to 6'3", maybe a 172 and a half, and if you're a giant, 175. And those are the crank arm lengths I would suggest for a road bike or a hybrid or anything used on the road other than a mountain bike. And that's about it. Thank you very much. I'm going to speak going to speak about the tires that I chose. Again, I chose specialized tires. All my bikes have specialized armadillo tires. These are the all-conditioned 23 millimeter tires. They have a 125 psi rating, and again, specialized tires are the best in the world. You can't go wrong. For a 23 millimeter tire on a tight wheelbase bike with an aluminum frame, I'm still getting a great deal of comfort. Most of the comfort though is designed into the frame. I'm not sure how much is into the tires, but this combination, if you're going to buy the Wellington 2.0 or any of the Windsor frames, this combination of wheel, frame, and tire, you're going to be very, very pleased at the ride quality. I'm very pleased at the handling, and very pleased at the acceleration and stiffness of the bottom bracket. So this has been a fun review to do because it's been nothing but good news. So anybody out there who can't afford those expensive bikes but still want a new bike so that you get all nice new bearing surfaces, Windsor Wellington 2.0 isn't going to disappoint you. A truly great bike from Windsor and Bikes Direct. Thank you. Oh, I wanted to discuss a little bit about frame angles. Frame angles, tiny little bit of degree of change can make a large difference. Most frames are anywhere from mountain bike to extreme fast handling road bike, and they may be only 4 degrees apart. So a little quick explanation. When you see the charts, you're going to see head tube angle and seat tube angle. And these two angles actually tell you what this bike's purpose actually is. The head tube angle is this short tube up here, and what angle it sits at in degrees determines what kind of a bike it is. This bike has a very steep angle of 74 degrees, which tells me it's a very fast handling racing bike. As the degrees back off, you get from 74 to 73. It's 73 is still can be a racing bike, but it's more of a relaxed geometry. It's something for someone that wants to go downhill very quickly and have a little better firm handling on the bike. As it backs down to 72 or so, you're talking about maybe a hybrid bike. And then as it goes down into the high 60s, 68, 69, 70, those are comfort bikes and mountain bikes. So the head tube actually tells you what kind of bike and how it's going to handle before you even buy it. Now of course, the overall distance from this hub to this hub is called the wheelbase, and the shorter the wheelbase, of course, the faster it's going to handle also. So the wheelbase combined with the head tube angle tells you a lot about the bike before you even ride it. Now the seat tube, you'll see a seat tube angle there also. With the seat tube angle, it tells you basically where your knees are going to come over the top of off the pedal. Now ideally, on the pedal spindle, which attaches to the crank, you want to be over the balls of your feet. That's how you adjust your cleats, or that's where you should be riding on a flat pedal. That's the most efficient place to ride. It's the most place to get ankling, and you can get your all the muscles involved can be used with that position. So the seat tube angle determines the length of your quadricep, the length of your top muscle, as relationship over the top of the pedal, because ideally with the pedal out here, you want this part of your knee to be centered over the pedal spindle. That's the ideal place, or the starting place you would have for the starting place for your fit. So the farther back this seat tube angle goes, the farther away this pedal gets, or the longer this quadricep has to be to make it fit. Now, of course, you've got lots of adjustment in the seat to slide it back and forth too. Seat tube angles are a matter of taste for a lot of people, but when you see seat tube angles in the 75, 76, 77 degree range, as this one's a 73 for a road bike, then we're talking about triathlon bikes. So if you see a high 70 or 77, 78 degree seat tube angle, the bike is designed for triathlons and to be used with aero bars. The whole bike is set up for aero bars. Now you can ride this on the road, but you'll have to slide your seat back as far as it'll go to simulate or get closer to this 73 degree road angle. And of course, this is your top tube, down tube, seat stay, and chain stay parts of the frame. The part that the crank mounts to is called the bottom bracket shell. And of course the fork. So when you take all these measurements together, once you learn what frame angles mean and how, measure the bike you're on now to see how it fits, compare that to the specs that are on Bikes Direct bikes when you're trying to pick out a bike to buy without ever getting on to ride it. So on this bike, I knew it was a 73 degree seat tube angle, which I'm happy with, because I'd like to push the seat forward on a 73 so that my legs clear this sharp seat post clamp. If this was far forward, like a 74 or 75, I would have to move the seat back and expose my legs to this clamp. So it was very important this had to be 73 or 72.5 degrees. The spec on the head tube at 74 degrees told me this is a fast handling racing bike and it's going to be fun to ride. And then of course the top tube gave me how much stretch I was going to have to the handlebars. And of course that can be somewhat adjusted with a stem length and a stem height. And of course the wheelbase, and the wheelbase is easiest to see is how close this tire is tucked into this seat tube. The closer that's tucked in there, the sharper or shorter that wheelbase is going to be. So I could tell without ever riding this bike, it's going to be a perfect bike for me, and it was. I hope this has helped you on frame angles and picking out a bike fit from Bikes Direct. Thank you.